You ever hear about a woman getting thrown out of her own house at 72? Well, let me tell you, Evelyn wasn't just any old lady. And this isn't just any story about a family falling apart. It's about what people do when the world tells them they don't matter anymore, and how a heart that refuses to harden can change more than one life. See, the day Evelyn's son Jason kicked her out wasn't full of shouting or drama. There was no slamming doors or wild accusations. Just this quiet, terrible moment where you realize the people you loved most have decided you don't belong anymore. And all you can do is hold onto your suitcase like it's the only thing standing between you and the street. The door clicked shut, and in that silence, her heart cracked in a way no one else seemed to hear, not even Jason, standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and his wife Melissa behind him, looking real pleased with herself, like she'd finally checked the last thing off her list. "You can't stay here anymore, Mom," Jason said, and his voice was cold as the tile on that kitchen floor. "We got bills, we got kids, we just can't carry you too." No hug. No, "Are you all right?" Not even a look back, the type. The kind of cold that doesn't need to be loud because it's final, and somehow that's worse. Evelyn, she'd skipped meals to buy Jason his first college textbook, stayed up all night, sewing his Halloween costumes from scratch. But now she was just another burden. No paycheck, no purpose, just a suitcase and whatever pride she hadn't left on that porch. But here's the thing nobody knew: deep in that battered purse was a debit card, access to a secret bank account holding $1.4 million and a deed to 40 acres of land that everyone else had written off as worthless 34 years ago. Funny how people only see what they expect: an old woman, sensible shoes, quiet voice, and think they know the whole story. But Evelyn, she didn't shed a tear, didn't break down when her legs started to ache on the walk to Maple Street. Not even when she settled onto that cold bus bench a few blocks from the house she'd once called home. She just sat, back hunched, hands clenched around her purse, and watched the world roll on by, like it didn't even notice her anymore. But she noticed everything, because life had taught her to keep her eyes open, especially when nobody else was looking. Let me back up a sec. See, Evelyn hadn't been fired. She'd resigned from the thrift store at church after her doctor set her spine, couldn't take lifting those heavy boxes anymore, and the pastor begged her to stay, but she just smiled and said, "I need to rest." And, maybe for the first time in her life, she meant it. Raising Jason alone after his father died in a construction accident, cleaning motel rooms, scrubbing hospital floors, counting every dime so Jason could have what he needed. She'd done it all, with love, with pride. But the hardest part was discovering the silence that followed, when the folks you'd sacrifice for most stopped seeing you all together. But see, Evelyn was stubborn. After her husband's accident, the insurance payout wasn't much, but tucked in that envelope was a land deed, 40 acres way out in the middle of nowhere, no road, no water, no power, and everyone told her to sell, take the cash, move on. But Evelyn held on. Every year, she scraped up just enough to pay the taxes, even when she barely had food in the fridge, because she believed you never know what tomorrow might bring. Last fall, a sharp-suited man came to the church, said he was buying land for a solar farm, and offered her real money. She only asked, "Can this stay private?" 3 weeks later, $1.4 million quietly landed in a trust under her late husband's name, and the world, well, it never had a clue. That first night out, Evelyn didn't check into a hotel or try to show off she slept in a women's shelter. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to be around folks who didn't care about what you owned, just whether you'd sit and listen. She split what little she had in her bag, laughed at bad jokes, held a stranger's hand while she cried, and for the first time in forever, Evelyn felt like maybe she still mattered. The next morning, she bought a run-down cottage with cash, fixed it up through a company name, Grace Holdings LLC, so nobody would guess, and set about building something she'd never had herself, a place that wouldn't throw anybody away. She got to work quietly volunteering at food pantries, funding repairs, slipping cash to youth centers, always anonymous, always behind scenes. When the old community hall came up for sale, she bought it, named it Evelyn's Table, and turned it into a haven. Nothing fancy, just hot soup, clean beds, soft music, and most of all, no questions. People came who had nowhere else to go, and Evelyn, she saw every one of them, because she remembered what it felt like to be invisible. Time passed. 2 years, to be exact. Evelyn's table grew, kids played in the garden. Soup simmered every morning. Friday nights the lights glowed with laughter and music. Meanwhile, Jason's life was falling apart, missed payments, bills piling up, Melissa packing up the kids and leaving for good. He bounced between couch surfing, side gigs, even sold his old guitar, but nothing stuck. One rainy afternoon, he ducked into the public library, saw a flyer with a name that punched him in the gut. Evelyn's table, meals, shelter, no one left behind. Something in him snapped, or maybe healed, I don't know, but the next morning he showed up at that little building, paint still fresh, kids running wild outside, and above the door, carved in wood, were the words, "Everyone has a place." He stepped inside, shivering, half hopeful, half ashamed, and there she was behind the desk, cardigan neat, hair pinned back, eyes soft but strong as mother, the woman he'd barely noticed for years. Jason choked out, "I got nowhere else to go." And Evelyn, she just led him to a table, poured him tea, and said, "Come in, you look cold." No lecture, no "I told you so," just warmth. He stared around, blinking, finally getting it, this was hers, all of it, built from the very love he'd thrown away. He stammered, "Why didn't you ever tell me you had money?" She just smiled. "Would it have changed anything?" She told him, "I needed to know who'd stand by me when I had nothing. That's who I built this for." Jason broke then, the shame and regret washing over him in a quiet, honest cry, and Evelyn, she just reached for his hand and said, "You forgot yourself, but you can still find your way back." Yeah, that happened. Spring crept back slow that year, like even the world was healing. Jason started showing up every day, fixing chairs, sorting food, patching leaks, not for money, just to be there, to make up for lost time. Fridays, they'd sit on the porch and watch the kids play. No more guilt, just peace. One evening, Evelyn handed Jason an envelope inside, the deed to his old house, an avoided check from the land sale, framed together. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "Now you know what happens when love comes before pride." He finally saw her, not as mom, not as a burden, but as a whole person, someone who could have chosen revenge, but built hope instead. Evelyn passed away that fall, quietly, just as she'd lived. No headlines, no grand speeches, but over 100 people came to her memorial. Folks from shelters, schools, churches, people who'd found a home because of her. Jason stood up front, holding her old apron, voice trembling, and said, "My mother left a house once with nothing but a suitcase and a quiet heart. But in that silence, she built something bigger than any of us ever knew." He turned to the door, reading the words she'd carved above it. "The doors that close behind you can never match the ones you open for others. So let me ask you, what matters more, holding on to pride or building something that outlasts our mistakes? Was Evelyn right to forgive, or should she have walked away for good? Tell me what you think, because out here, everyone's got a story, and maybe it's time we listen a little closer."